Right, so has Israel escalated again in its efforts to keep aid out of Gaza by targeting an aid ship heading their way, but whilst it was still in international waters more than 2,000 kilometres away off the coast of Malta? It seems they have. The ship in question, aptly called the Conscience, belongs to the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, or FFC, who are a grassroots initiative formed in 2010 in order to enact direct action missions to support the dignity and humanity of the Palestinian people, and notably those living in Gaza, in order to break the now 17-year-long blockade of Gaza itself, because of course the events we witness today did not begin on October 7th, nor even 17 years ago, but long before that. So did Israel strike this vessel all the way across the Mediterranean in Maltese waters? Are they that desperate to stop aid getting to Gaza they'll target shipping that far away? Putting in perspective perhaps the response to Houthi shipping interference, if half the Med may now be considered unsafe. And is it not the height of hypocrisy when something like this happens and Israel is itself begging for international aid at the same time to combat wildfires, all as the aid effort in Gaza now verges on collapse? Is it any wonder Israel is getting the blame and the backlash for this as they stay uncustomarily silent on the matter? Right, so in the early hours of yesterday morning, the humanitarian aid ship Conscience, a refurbished trawler owned by the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, the FFC, was reportedly attacked by drones in international waters near Malta. The assault, which occurred just after midnight local time, struck the ship, causing a breach in the hull and setting the ship's engine ablaze, leaving the ship disabled, currently stabilised and at anchor, but at risk of sinking if moved. At time of writing, Israel has not taken responsibility for the strike, nor has anyone else, but the FFC and various media outlets have attributed the attack to Israeli forces, given the context and history of similar incidents and notably the ship's mission and where it was headed. It's been a simple question of who had motivation to stop the ship, but as time has worn on over the last 24 hours, it has become clear that Israel very much have been behind the attack. The FFC is a grassroots movement composed of campaigns and initiatives from around the world and united in their mission to end the illegal Israeli blockade of Gaza. Since its inception in 2010, the coalition has organised multiple flotillas, groups of ships, aimed at delivering humanitarian aid to Gaza and highlighting the humanitarian crisis resulting from that blockade. Their actions are grounded in principles of non-violence and solidarity with the Palestinian people, without affiliation to any political party or organisation. But this isn't the first time they've been attacked by Israel either. In 2010, Israeli forces in speedboats forcibly boarded the vessels, and following resistance on one of the boats that arrived in their first flotilla, 9 FFC activists were killed. In 2018, the FFC organised another venture, the Just Future for Palestine flotilla, consisting of 2 ships, the Al Auda and the Freedom. Both ships were boarded and seized by the Israeli Navy, and all on board were arrested, with subsequent reports of their treatment involving having been tasered and beaten before finally being deported. The Conscience was carrying 30 international human rights activists and humanitarian aid destined for Gaza, en route to pick up more people, including a certain Greta Thunberg amongst others in Malta. But they never got that far. The drone strikes caused significant damage, igniting a fire, creating a breach in the hull, rendering the vessel immobile and at risk of sinking. Despite issuing an SOS distress signal, the ship reportedly received assistance only from Cyprus, which initially raised questions about the response from Maltese authorities. More on that in a moment. The Maltese government later confirmed the safety of everyone on board and stated that a patrol boat was dispatched to assist in extinguishing the fire. The FFC issued a damning statement in response, however, which reads, "At 0023 Maltese time, the Conscience, a Freedom Flotilla Coalition ship, came under direct attack in international waters. The Freedom Flotilla Coalition had been organising a non-violent action under a media blackout to avoid any potential sabotage. Volunteers from over 21 countries travelled to Malta to board the mission to Gaza, including prominent figures. On the morning of the scheduled departure, the vessel was attacked. Armed drones attacked the front of an unarmed civilian vessel twice, causing a fire and a substantial breach in the hull. The last communication in the early morning of the 2nd of May indicated the drones are still circling the ship. The ship, located in international waters just off the coast of Malta, issued an SOS distress signal immediately following the attack. A vessel from southern Cyprus was dispatched, but is not providing the critical electrical support needed. The drone strike appears to have deliberately targeted the ship's generator, leaving the crew without power and placing the vessel at great risk of sinking. On board are international human rights activists on a non-violent humanitarian mission to challenge Israel's illegal and deadly siege of Gaza and to deliver desperately needed life-saving aid. Since March 2nd, 2025, Israel has barred all aid trucks from entering Gaza, deliberately starving over 2 million civilians in full view of the international community. Humanitarian experts estimate the population in Gaza requires at least 600 aid trucks each day to meet even the most basic needs, yet not a single truck has been allowed in for 2 months. The Maritime Rescue Coordination Centre in Rome advised that a tugboat has been sent out and is on the scene. Our communications with the vessel were destroyed in the attack, and we are unable to confirm this. Under international maritime law and conventions, Malta is obliged to act and to ensure the safety of a civilian ship in distress within its proximity. The lack of response and information about the rescue efforts breaches international customary law. Israeli ambassadors must be summoned and answer to violations of international law, including the ongoing blockade and the bombing of our civilian vessel in international waters. We demand that Malta immediately respond to its obligation and ensure the safety of all on board the vessel. The international community condemns this aggression against an unarmed humanitarian aid vessel and demand that Maltese authorities immediately act. All states end political, financial and military support for Israel's illegal siege, blockade, occupation and apartheid. Civil society contact Maltese embassies and high commissions globally to ensure the safety of our humanitarians. We demand a full investigation of the attacks of the concerned authorities and urge all states and international organisations to provide assistance. Seems like the bare minimum being asked for really there, isn't it? It certainly implies without direct accusation at that point that they suspected Israel to be responsible. The attack on the conscience comes amid a worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, as we know. According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, they have warned that after 2 months of total blockage of humanitarian aid, the situation in Gaza is now on the verge of total collapse, which is obviously a situation that cannot be tolerated to continue further. Yet strikes such as that on the Freedom Flotilla imply Israel are determined to keep the starvation going. This is obviously unacceptable and illegal, and the situation cannot be allowed to deteriorate further. But again, where is the international response? Israel has a responsibility to do everything possible to ensure that civilians under its control receive the basic conditions they need, yet instead they are using starvation as a form of collective punishment, a war crime, and appear to be prepared to go to, as shown here, extreme lengths to keep that going. Gavin Kelleher is a British aid worker currently operating in Gaza, and he has highlighted for the big issue the dire conditions faced by Gazans, emphasising the urgent need for humanitarian assistance. The situation right now is the most desperate I've seen it. People have already run out of food. As a humanitarian worker, it's incredibly frustrating that we've had our hands tied and been completely prevented from providing the assistance to people who need it. We're seeing a total collapse of Palestinians' coping mechanisms. They're selling their last remaining belongings. They're selling their clothes. They're trying to exchange a bag of diapers for a bag of lentils. Most families are still surviving on just a meal a day. Some people are having to split that in two to make it stretch, but that meal a day for around 1 million people in Gaza is being provided from community kitchens run by a collection of different NGOs, local partners and UN agencies. But those community kitchens are now closing in their dozens, and they will continue to close over the coming days as they've completely exhausted all food stocks. Of course, the hypocrisy of Israel's alleged actions here can't be ignored either. The attack on the conscience occurred at the same time as Israel has been appealing for international assistance to combat wildfires within its own borders, hasn't it? That plea for aid, while simultaneously enforcing a blockade that restricts humanitarian assistance to Gaza, has seen them deservedly slammed by their critics. It is particularly hypocritical and two-faced, to say the least. Very two-faced, to say the least. But speaking of two-faced, though, let's come back to Malta at this point. You see, it's one thing for drones to be deployed to Maltese waters, but someone can't be 2,000 kilometres away controlling them, can they? So cue some incriminating flight plans. It seems the Maltese government had allowed Israel to use their airspace to allow an Israeli plane, accompanied it seems by a US aircraft as well, to fly for 5 hours while someone on board controlled the drones to make the attacks on the conscience. It's the smoking gun that lays the blame firmly at Israel's feet, aided, it would appear, by the US. But not without Maltese help as well, it seems. On top of that, Malta has refused to allow the conscience to berth in Valletta, the Maltese capital, a move seemingly to force the 30-strong crew to abandon their vessel and let it sink. Malta has got questions to answer here, therefore. Now it's got very, very big ones to answer. The drone attack on the conscience represents a significant escalation in the measures being taken by Israel, and in this case taken solely for no other reason, and it seems with US assistance, to enforce the blockade of Gaza, targeting a civilian vessel engaged in a humanitarian mission that they want to stop and see fail, and appear prepared to not wait until they enter Israeli waters to act, and all to keep a starving population starving. This incident endangered the lives of 30 aid workers and their crew, all to ensure the illegal blockade of aid to Gaza continues. And now Malta, it would appear, have implicated themselves in this. Aid must get into Gaza, and if Israel are determined to stop that, along with the US and Malta, then this job has shown not everyone is content to sit on their hands, and the world should be appalled at its own inaction in the face of this attack. That a handful of people on an old trawler have more humanity about them than they all do. Of course, for an insight into the mindset of those in Israel using starvation as a weapon, you need only watch Louis Theroux's latest documentary on the settlers, who might be dismissed for being the extreme end of Israeli society. But you don't get people titled the godmother of settlers who have Benjamin Netanyahu's aides at the end of their phone if you're on the fringes, do you? Get all the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't already done so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as help support the channel at the very same time, which is very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people. I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.